My name is Alice. As a full-time housewife, I support my husband Fred. I met my husband through a mutual acquaintance, and we were able to get married. My husband is very kind and, even now I still think I was happy to have married my husband who is always considerate to me. One of such days, when I was at home, I received a phone call from my husband. "Hello, Alice. What's wrong? You're at work, aren't you?" "No, it's something more important. I need you to head to the hospital right now." "I'll be on my way on the bullet train right away." "Yeah, it's fine, but what's going on?" The word hospital made my heart flutter. "My father seems to be in danger." "What?" "Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm on my way. I'll be right there." My father-in-law had been ill ever since my husband and I got married. Lately he has been hospitalized on and off repeatedly, so I was prepared for this. But still, when my husband told me what had happened, I was shocked. "Father-in-law, please get saved, somehow." I headed for the hospital with these thoughts weighing on my mind. But when I arrived at the hospital, my father-in-law had already passed away. My husband was also unable to see him die, and he seemed to be enduring quite a lot. I was also sad to hear that my beloved father-in-law had passed away. I felt sad, but I still put on a brave face and supported my husband. After the funeral finished uneventfully, my husband and I spent the night at my parents-in-law's home. It was then that my husband spoke up apologetically. "Actually, I'm thinking of moving in with my mother." "What? With your mother?" "Yes. I think it would be sad to live alone in this house, and I'm also worried about my health. To be honest, I don't like my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is selfish and her attitude toward me is harsh. If it were true, I would have refused. She kept ordering me around at my father-in-law's wake and funeral, despite having done almost nothing myself. Even now, she has gone off somewhere. However, after losing my father-in-law, my husband's feeling of not wanting to lose any more family members were clear. "Yes. Let's do it." I nodded for my husband, then I began to live with my mother-in-law. But this was the beginning of the worst thing that could have happened. Sure enough, my mother-in-law treated me very badly. "Hey, do you clean this house properly? It's so dusty, it makes my nose itch." "Yes, I do. I try to do as much as I can, but..." "Try? What do you suppose to do with such an ambiguous statement?" "I would have done it more thoroughly. Fred in a place like this. What if he gets some freakish virus?" My mother-in-law would say so and get angry at me. She wanted to say that my in-laws' house hadn't been cleaned up at all, but I held back, thinking that further quarrel was not in my best interest. "I'm sorry. I'll clean up now." "Absolutely. I'm going out now, so finish cleaning before I come back." After saying this, my mother-in-law left the house. Lately, she was constantly going out somewhere. She doesn't know much about the area, nor does she know anyone there. I wonder where was she going? With such a question in my mind, I set up vacuuming. But then, in such a daily routine, something happy happened to us. I immediately told my husband about it. "Hey, hi. I think I'm pregnant." "Oh. Really?" "Yes." I nodded, and my husband thrust his hands high into the air. "We did it. We're finally having a baby." My husband and I had always talked about our wish for a child someday. We were finally blessed with a child. I was anxious about having a baby after I turned 30. However, my husband made sacrifices to support me. But my mother-in-law didn't change at all. Don't skip housework just because you're pregnant. When I was pregnant with Fred, I was doing housework until just before I gave birth. By saying such things, she wouldn't allow me to relax at home. The moments my mother-in-law would say harsh things to me was when my husband was not around. In front of my husband, she acts like a quiet mother. And I kept quiet so as not to put an unnecessary burden on my husband. Still, I wonder how long this life will last, while the days when I felt down went on. But I tried to do my best for the sake of the child I was carrying in my belly. And each time I would give myself encouragement. And I was able to give birth to an adorable baby girl safely. After discussing it with my husband, I named the child Erica. Then, I thought that after returning home, I could spend happy days with Erica and my husband. However, that delusion crumbled. She is always crying and being noisy. Can't you shut her up a little? I couldn't believe these words from my mother-in-law. I wonder if she has any desire to love her grandchildren at all. I'm sorry, but it's the children's job to cry. What if it interferes with my sleep? That would be unbearable. What if I don't get enough sleep, and it makes my daily life difficult? Thus she said, but my mother-in-law was at home every day watching TV. And only went out once in a while. One day, after 6 months of such days had passed, my husband was on a business trip and, at home, just my mother-in-law, my daughter, and I, 3 of us left. My mother-in-law, who was out somewhere just minutes before, was, anyway, in a bad mood. She kept ignoring my words. One day, in such a disturbing atmosphere, an incident occurred. At night, as usual, my daughter started her night crying. Each time, I would hold Erica in my arms and soothe her in the living room. And then, it seems her patience ran out. My mother-in-law yelled at us in the living room. I can't sleep because she cries so loudly at night. If you can't shut her up, you stay outside too. Saying that, she pushed us out onto the balcony. It was the day the big cold wave arrived, and the air was chilly. I immediately tried to go back to my room, but to my surprise, my mother-in-law had locked the door. She left us out in the cold weather. My phone was in the house. Moreover, we lived on a high floor of an apartment building, and I couldn't even call someone for help from the balcony. It was a desperate situation. My daughter's cries became worse because of the cold. It sounded like a scream to me. I desperately held my daughter and protected her from the cold. But the night was still long. Hoping that, at one point my mother-in-law would unlock the door, I endured the cold. But as time went by, I lost all sensation of my body. Before I knew it, my daughter had stopped crying. Please save my child. While I was praying for that, I held my daughter in my arms for a long time. Then, in the corner of my mind, I felt as if I could hear my husband's voice. And then I completely lost consciousness. When I regained consciousness, I was in the hospital. I opened my eyes and my husband was there, breathing heavily. I am so glad you woke up. And Erica, she's fine. She's in another room now, but her life is not in danger. Hearing those words brought tears to my eyes. All these feelings, anxiety, coldness, and fear, flowed down as tears at once. The doctor told me that, if you both had been discovered even a little bit later, she would have lost her life. Huh? Was it really like that?
Yeah.
I finished my work a bit earlier. I took the first train home. I think that was good enough. But when I got home and went to the bedroom, none of you two were there. When I found you on the balcony, My husband stopped talking. Thank you. You saved my life. How did it come to this? We were locked out. Who did that? Your mother. Who else could have done it? I told my husband in no uncertain terms. My daughter's life was in danger. My anger was rising like magma. She told us to stay outside because of Erica's noisy crying at night, and she locked us out on the balcony. I thought she would bring us back eventually. I didn't think it would be in the morning. No, but I didn't think. My husband still couldn't believe it. But this was an unshakable fact. Think about it. There was no one else in the house but me and my mother-in-law. Who else could have done it? Oh, yes, that's for sure. I can't live with your mother. The same goes for me, and first of all, I have to protect my daughter. My husband's face tightened at my words. I understand. I'll talk to my mother. I was able to leave the hospital that day because the test results showed no abnormalities. But my daughter still needed to stay in the hospital. So we went home to finish talking before my daughter was discharged from hospital. When we got home, my mother-in-law looked at me uncomfortably. Oh, my God. You're out of the hospital already. She seemed relieved that my condition was not serious. I stared at her coldly. Mother-in-law, you know what you did, don't you?
Nah.
What? I don't know anything. I just woke up this morning and saw Hitoshi in a panic calling for an ambulance. I sighed heavily. Mother-in-law, you locked me and my daughter out, didn't you? I would never do that. I've been waiting anxiously for all of you to come home, just as I am now. Because my mother-in-law was in front of my husband, she was play-acting as a laudable person. But that act no longer worked with my husband. That night, there was only Mom, Alice, and Erica. So besides Mom, there was no one else who could have kept Alice and the child out. Wait a minute. I remember yesterday too. I remember yesterday because the child wouldn't sleep. Alice went outside on her own. I was there when it happened. Then why was Alice outside the whole time? I don't know. Didn't she fall asleep? I shook my head. I wouldn't have gone outside by myself in such a cold night. I have proof. What proof? I turned to my husband. What did you do when you found me in the morning? I was surprised. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. So I unlocked it and then opened the door. I nodded at my husband's explanation. Then, suppose you went out on the balcony without permission. How did you say I locked the door? I raised a question at my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law looked distressed. Yes, I did that. Mother. So it was you who did it, after all. I was telling you it was like that. Besides, this woman played the role of a kind mother in front of you, but in front of me, she would completely change. Is that true?
Yeah.
When you're not at home, she would make me clean the house. I was even made to recook the dishes. But I didn't tell you about it. Why? I didn't want to cause you unnecessary worry. I thought it would be better if I just put up with it myself. I glared at my mother-in-law. But I've run out of patience. You've caused us so much pain. When I said that, she glared at me with angry eyes in defeat. What? You're overstating it. Mother. It's your fault. Fred is now living away from me because of you. You took Fred away from me. And yet, what is it that you are suffering for? I've been suffering more than you. Typical of a parent who has never been able to let go of his child. But I was not surprised. I was somehow getting that vibe. But my husband didn't know anything about it. He was just astonished. Such is your ego. I didn't separate Fred from you. And what's more, you were out for a night, and it wasn't a big deal. When my mother-in-law spat this out, it was my husband who became furious. Don't play dumb with me. What? Why would I, Fred? Can't you understand how much the two of them were suffering in the cold? The reality that her husband was angry with her, my mother-in-law was simply stunned. If only Erica had been discovered a little later, she would have lost her life. How can you say it was no big deal after causing someone that much pain? Her life. That's what the doctor said. My precious daughter almost died because of you. Did you even worry about her at all? The mother-in-law was disheartened by her husband's anger. Of course she doesn't feel that way. She was always complaining to me about how noisy the kids are. That's why she was perfectly capable of shutting us out. My husband exhaled loudly to calm himself down. I can't live with you anymore, Mom. I want you out of this house. And don't ever have anything to do with us again. The son told her that he was going to sever ties from her. My mother-in-law, as expected, got very anxious. Wait a minute. If I get kicked out of this house, I have nowhere to go. Are you okay with that? I see no problem with that. On the contrary, I see a problem if you live with us. I have to protect my precious daughter and my wife. I feel the same way. I also told my mother-in-law very clearly about my feelings. You understand, don't you? Your father is gone and I am all alone. And if I get kicked out of this house, how am I supposed to live? I gave my panicked stepmother a hard look. And yet you have complained about my housework and cooking? If you fear we are going to kick you out of this house, don't you think you should be a little more grateful to us? My mother-in-law's face turned bitter again at my words. She looked at me again. Well, I was grateful. But I was doing the housework too. I can't help but notice the things that aren't getting done. Really? From my point of view, you were just being conceited. As far as my husband told me, I don't think she is a very good cook either. My husband nodded at me. No, she isn't. Mom couldn't cook or do the housework. My father did the laundry and cleaning, and even the dishes you cooked were just things you bought at the supermarket, weren't they? My mother-in-law bit her lip in frustration. That's why I figured Mom would be unable to live on her own. So I decided to move in with her. But you just complain about me like I'm some kind of big shot. Even without this incident, I would have told my husband that I couldn't live with you any longer. I understood. I will not complain about anything from now on. So, let me stay here. Even financially, what am I supposed to do when I leave this house? My mother-in-law screamed hysterically. Still, I remained calm. You have money, don't you? What are you talking about? Of course I don't have it. You always say you are going out. You always go to pachinko, don't you? Where does the money come from? My mother-in-law's face turned pale at my point. What are you talking about? Of course not. Mother, how long have you been gambling? My mother-in-law shook her head at my husband's question. Don't be deceived. This woman is lying to you and trying to get me out of the house. I'm not at all lying. I saw it. I saw a pachinko parlor card in your wallet. While I was cleaning the house, I happened to see what was inside my mother-in-law's wallet. There were a number of cards in there. The name of a pachinko parlor near our house was written on all of them. It seems that your mother-in-law is a regular customer at many pachinko parlors. But where does the money come from? No, that's... Don't tell me you've been dipping into my father's savings? Sweat broke out on my mother-in-law's forehead as my husband muttered something. Oh, my father-in-law's savings? I see, Alice, you didn't know. Actually, my father was saving for me and Alice. But he was too weak to go to the bank, so my mother was in charge of it. I looked at my mother-in-law in surprise. Don't tell me you had access to that money? This money was mine to spend. Your father had told me I could use this money. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think so. He was about to make you the beneficiary of the insurance money. I'm sure you usually gave and received money. And then you go and take our savings. What? My husband nudged his mother-in-law. I've had enough of you. Get the hell out of my house. This was my husband's ultimatum. But my mother-in-law would not give up yet. No. I'm not leaving this house. If you force me to leave, I will call the police. My nervous mother-in-law said something like that. So I took out my cell phone. That's just as well. Let's call the police then. Hey, forget it. It's nothing important. Calling the police would only be a nuisance. It's not an unimportant matter. We were left on a balcony in the cold weather. My daughter almost lost her life. Thus I said and held the cell phone to my ear. Wait. What's the point of this? In any case, let's report to the police and leave it to them to decide what the charges are. If you're not guilty, you will get out right away. No issues with that, right? As I said this, my mother-in-law clutched at my husband. Please, stop that woman. What if I get arrested for this? What will you do? What will you do if your own parent become criminal? It will be hard for you to live as well, you know? My husband shook off his sobbing mother's hands. That's not what matters. If what you did was a crime, what would you do? You have to pay for it. What happens to you after that is of no concern to us. Neither have we any interest to know." At my husband's words, my mother-in-law collapsed on the spot. Then she was taken away by the police who came on my call. At that moment she did not resist at all. She simply rounded her back and walked out of the room. My mother-in-law was later arrested. And 2 weeks after my mother-in-law was no longer at home, my daughter was able to leave the hospital without further incident. Since my mother-in-law has gone, Erica never did her night. Erica never did her night crying again. She was just putting an adorable smile on her face. I am sure that the reason she cried so much at night was due, in part to my mother-in-law's influence. And now that my mother-in-law is no longer with us, our daily family life is unimaginably happier than ever before. I'm living my life with the hope that these happy days will continue in the future.